The auction block creaked beneath Cordelia's bare feet as another bid rang out across the dusty town square. The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip in the sweltering Wyoming heat of 1882, and she closed her eyes, trying to disappear into herself as rough hands grabbed her chin, forcing potential buyers to examine her teeth like she was livestock.
1,000.
A deep voice cut through the crowd, silencing the rabble of miners and merchants who'd been eyeing her with predatory grins. Cordelia's eyes snapped open to see a tall figure pushing through the mass of body's broad shoulders, beneath a weathered leather vest. Dark hair catching the afternoon sun, and eyes the color of storm clouds that seemed to look right through her shame to something deeper. Sold to Maverick Thorne. The gavel crashed down with finality that made her stomach lurch. She'd heard whispers about the Thorne Ranch, 20,000 acres of untamed wilderness, where men went to disappear and few women ever set foot. Her new owner strode forward, those storm-gray eyes never leaving her face as he counted out crisp bills, but instead of the rough hands she expected, he shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Can you ride?" his voice was, gravelly, like rocks tumbling down a mountainside, and when she nodded mutely, he helped her down from the platform with surprising gentleness. Within minutes, she was mounted behind him on a magnificent black stallion, her arms wrapped around his solid frame as they thundered away from the jeering crowd. The wind whipped her tangled auburn hair, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than despair a wild, reckless hope that maybe this stranger with the gentle hands and hard eyes might be different from the monster's hood owned her before as they crested a hill. The Thorne Ranch sprawled before them like something from a dream, a sprawling log house nestled against towering pines, cattle dotting emerald pastures that stretched to the horizon, and mountains rising like cathedral spires in the distance. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely alien to the grimy mining camps and brothels that had been her prison for so long. "This is your home now," Maverick said as they dismounted near the stable, and something in his tone made her search his face. There was no ownership in his expression, no calculation of what she might be worth to him, just a steady resolve that she couldn't understand. "What do you want from me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Raw with the fear of every woman who'd been bought and sold, he was quiet for a long moment, studying the mountains as if they held answers she needed. "I want you to remember what it feels like to be free," he said finally, and something inside her chest cracked open like an egg. "The papers say I own you, but those papers are going straight into my fireplace tonight. You're nobody's property, Cordelia. Not anymore." Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, and she realized she was crying, not the bitter tears of desperation she'd grown accustomed to, but something clean and healing, like the first rain after a long drought. The next morning, Cordelia woke in a real bed for the first time in 2 years. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, and the scent of coffee and bacon drifted up from the kitchen below. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, afraid that moving would shatter the dream and send her tumbling back into the nightmare she'd escaped. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. "Cordelia? I've left some clothes outside your door." Maverick's voice was muffled by the thick wooden barrier, respectful of her privacy in a way that still felt foreign and precious. "Breakfast is ready when you are. No hurry." She found a simple blue dress, sturdy boots, and undergarments that actually fit luxuries she'd almost forgotten existed. When she finally made her way downstairs, Maverick was sitting at a rough-hewn table, reading a letter with a frown creasing his brow. He looked up as she entered, and his expression softened. "How did you sleep?" He poured coffee into a china. Cuprial china. Delicate and painted with tiny roses, and she wondered how a man who looked like he'd been carved from granite had come to own such beautiful things. "Better than I have in ... She started, then trailed off, unsure how to finish without revealing too much of the darkness she carried. "You don't have to talk about it," he said quietly, sliding the cup across the table. "Not unless you want to." Over breakfast, she learned that Maverick ran his ranch mostly alone, with only an elderly Lakota man named Kestrel, who helped with the horses and served as both friend and conscience. The previous owner had been Maverick's father, who died the winter before, leaving his son, a successful ranch, and a burden of regret for all the things they'd never said to each other. He was a hard man, Maverick explained, as they walked to the stables after eating. Fair, but hard. Never saw the point in softness or sentiment. Spent most of my life trying to prove I was as tough as he was. And now? Cordelia asked, surprised. By her own boldness? He paused to stroke the neck of a beautiful chestnut mare. Now I think maybe he was wrong about some things. Maybe strength isn't about being the hardest thing in the valley. Maybe it's about knowing when to be gentle. The mare whickered softly, pressing her velvet nose against Cordelia's palm. She likes you, Maverick observed. Her name's Serenade. Would you like to ride her? Cordelia hadn't been on a horse since she was a child, back when her world consisted of her father's small farm and her mother's flower garden. But as Maverick helped her into the saddle, muscle memory awakened, and soon they were cantering across the pasture. Wind singing in her ears and something wild and long-suppressed awakening in her chest, they rode in comfortable silence until they reached a small creek that wound through the property like a silver ribbon. Dismounting, they let the horses drink while Cordelia marveled at the clarity of the water, so different from the murky streams near the mining camps. Why did you buy me? The question had been burning in her throat all morning. Maverick skipped a stone across the water's surface, watching the ripples spread. My father used to say that a man's character is measured by how he treats those who can't fight back. He turned to face her, those storm-gray eyes, intense and honest. I've seen what men do to women they think they own. I couldn't walk away and let that happen to you. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're brave. You've survived things that would break most people. I know you're proud you held your head up on that platform, even when they treated you like cattle. And I know you deserve better than what this world has given you. Standing there by the creek with the sun warm on her face and kindness in a stranger's eyes, 2 weeks passed like a dream Cordelia was afraid to wake from. Each morning brought new freedoms, the right to choose her own clothes, to speak without permission, to walk outside without fear. Maverick never demanded anything from her, never even hinted that his kindness came with expectations. He simply existed around her like a solid, reassuring presence, offering work if she wanted it, conversation if she desired company, and solitude when she needed to heal. But freedom, she discovered, was more terrifying than captivity in some ways, at least in chains. She'd known what was expected of her. Now, with endless choices stretching before her like unmarked territory, she felt lost and overwhelmed. I don't know who I am anymore, she confessed to Maverick one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains crimson and gold. For so long I was just ... property, something to be used. I don't remember how to be. A person. Maverick whittled a piece of pine, his knife moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Maybe that's not something you remember, he said thoughtfully. Maybe it's something you discover. Like exploring new country, you don't know what's around the next bend until you get there. She watched his hands as he worked, noting the calluses that spoke of years of honest labor, the gentle precision with which he shaped the wood. Everything about him seemed solid and real, in a way that made her feel more solid and real too. Tell me about before, she said impulsively. Auction, before, ... all of it. Who were you when you were free? A shadow crossed his face, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he set down his whittling and leaned back in his chair. I was somebody's daughter, she said quietly. My father grew wheat, and my mother had the most beautiful garden you've ever seen. Roses and lavender and herbs that made the whole house smell like heaven. I used to help her tend them. What happened? His voice was gentle, but she heard the steel underneath the quiet fury of a man who'd seen too much injustice in the world. Drought, crop failure, debts my father couldn't pay. The words came easier than she'd expected, as if Maverick's presence made it safe to remember. The men who held our mortgage weren't patient. They took everything, the farm, the house, even my mother's wedding ring. And when that wasn't enough, ... She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. Maverick's jaw tightened. They had no right. They had the law on their side. That was right enough. The law and justice aren't always the same thing, he said fiercely. What they did to you, to your family, it was wrong, no matter what papers they had. Warm unfurled in her chest at his anger on her behalf. When was the last time anyone had been angry for her rather than at her? My mother used to say that gardens teach you about hope, she said, surprising herself. Every spring you plant. Seeds not knowing if they'll grow, but you plant them anyway because you believe in the possibility. Smart woman, she was. She died believing her garden would bloom again someday, even after we lost everything. Cordelia looked out at the vast expanse of Maverick's land, imagining what it might look like dotted with flowers. I think she would have liked it here. There's good soil by the creek, Maverick said quietly. Been thinking it could use some flowers. Their eyes met, and something passed between them in understanding. A recognition of shared longing for beauty in a world that often seemed determined to stamp it out. Cordelia felt her heart begin to beat faster, not with fear this time, but with something dangerously close to hope. I could show you where, he offered, and she nodded, not trusting her voice, as they sat in comfortable silence. Watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, Cordelia realized she was no longer thinking about survival. For the first time in years, she was thinking about the future, about roots and growth and the possibility of planting something that might actually have a chance to bloom. The garden project became their shared secret over the following days. Maverick showed her the spot he'd mentioned, a gentle slope near the creek where morning sun would give way to afternoon shade, protected from harsh winds by a stand of cottonwoods. The soil was rich and dark, perfect for coaxing life from dormant seeds. We'll need to order supplies from Denver, Maverick said as they knelt together, examining the earth. Seeds, proper tools, maybe some rose bushes if you want them. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted gently. Besides, this place could use some beauty. It's been too long without a woman's touch. As he said it, his fingers accidentally brushed hers in the soil, and Cordelia felt a jolt of electricity shoot up her arm. She pulled back quickly, but not before she caught the way his breath hitched, the way his gray eyes darkened as they met hers. They worked in careful companionship after that, mapping out beds for vegetables and herbs, planning pathways lined with wildflowers. But there was a new tension between them now, a heightened awareness that made every accidental touch feel significant. Every shared glance charged with possibility. It was Kestrel who finally broke the spell of their careful politeness. The old Lakota man appeared one morning as they were laying out string lines for the garden beds, his weathered face creased with what might have been amusement. You dance around each other like young deer, he observed in his gravelly English, settling onto a nearby stump to watch them work. Afraid to startle? Afraid to run? Maverick's jaw tightened. Kestrel, the woman has been owned, the older man continued, ignoring Maverick's warning tone. But she is not owned now. And you think your gentleness makes you weak. Are you afraid of wanting what you want? Cordelia felt heat flood her cheeks. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, Kestrel replied. Simple like sunrise, like rain on dry ground. You think because bad men hurt you, all men will? Hurt you, he thinks, because he bought you. He has no right to love you. Both foolish. Love. The word escaped Cordelia's lips like a startled bird. Kestrel's dark eyes moved between them with ancient wisdom. You think I am blind? While you watch each other when you think the other is not looking? The way you both find reasons to work? Near each other, to touch hands when passing tools. The way you both smile for the first time in months. Maverick stood abruptly, his face flushed. That's enough, old man. Kestrel wasn't finished. Your father, he was afraid to. Afraid. To show softness, afraid it made him weak. You see where that Ladeau's son, who barely knew him, a house full of silence, a heart that forgot how to be happy? He looked directly at Cordelia then. And you, daughter of flowers, you think you are broken goods. But broken things can be mended. And gardens grow most beautiful in soil that has known hardship. With that pronouncement, he rose and walked away, leaving them staring after him in stunned silence. Cordelia was the first to speak. Is it true? She asked quietly. What he said. About ... about watching each other? Maverick's hands clenched at his sides. Cordelia, I never meant. I bought your freedom, not your affection. I would never presume that's not what I asked. She stepped closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. I asked if it's true that you watch me. His storm gray eyes searched her face desperately. Yes, he admitted roughly. God help me. Yes. I watch you discover your own strength every day, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I watch you tend the seedlings we started, and I think about how much life you have in you despite everything you've survived. I watch you, and He stopped, jaw working, as if the words were trying to escape against his will. And you what? She whispered. And I fall a little more in love with you every single day, he confessed, the words torn from somewhere deep. In his chest? Which makes me the worst kind of man because you've trusted me to protect you. Not to, she silenced him by placing her fingers against his lips, marveling at her own boldness. What if, she said carefully, what if I've been watching you too? The confession hung in the air between them like morning mist, delicate and transformative. Maverick's eyes searched her face, looking for any sign that she spoke from obligation, rather than truth. You don't have to say that, he said quietly, though his voice shook with barely restrained longing. You don't owe me anything, especially not. Stop. Cordelia's hand moved from his lips to cup his jaw, feeling the rough scrape of day-old whiskers against her palm. Stop deciding what I feel. Stop protecting me from my own choices. For a long moment, they stood frozen in that space between friendship and something infinitely more dangerous. Then Maverick's hand covered hers, pressing it more firmly against. His cheek and the last of her walls crumbled. I watch you with the horses, she whispered, emboldened by the heat in his eyes. The way you gentle them with patience instead of force. I watch you read by the fire in the evenings, and I wonder what thoughts put that crease between your eyebrows. I watch you when you think I'm not looking, and She took a shaky breath. I wonder what it would feel like to be touched by hands that choose to be gentle. Something broke open in his expression. Cordelia. I'm not asking you to save me, she said firmly. I'm asking you to let me choose you. There's a difference. His thumb traced across her knuckles with reverent care. You're sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to the way things were. Instead of answering with words, she rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, testing, both of them afraid of shattering the fragile trust between them. But when Maverick responded with careful passion, his free arm circling her waist to pull her closer, she melted against him with a soft sigh of surrender. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Maverick rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he were memorizing the moment. I never thought I could feel this way again, Cordelia admitted. Safe enough to want something more than just survival, I never thought I'd find. Someone worth changing for, he replied. Worth learning to be gentle for. They spent the afternoon planting their garden with new purpose, every shared task taking on deeper meaning. When Maverick's hands covered hers to help her space the seeds properly, she didn't pull away. When she brushed dirt from his cheek, he leaned into her touch instead of flinching. They were learning a new language together, one built on consent and desire rather than ownership and fear. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Cordelia curled into Maverick's side with natural ease. His arm tightened around her, and she could feel his heart beating steadily beneath her cheek. What happens now? She asked, not from fear, but from genuine curiosity about their future. Now we take it one day at a time, he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. We tend our garden and see what grows. We learn how to be happy together. If people talk, if they say things about us, his arm tightened protectively. Let them talk. They don't know our story. They don't know what we've built together. As if summoned by their conversation, Kestrel appeared from the direction of the stables leading Maverick's stallion. He took in their intertwined position with satisfaction. Better, he announced with a decisive nod. Much better. Now, maybe. The young man will stop moping around like a lovesick calf, and the young woman will stop jumping every time someone speaks kindly to her. Cordelia actually laughed for what felt like the first time in years. Were we that obvious? 2. A blind man in a thunderstorm, Kestrel replied dryly. But love should be obvious, should be proud and strong, like a tree that's not ashamed to reach for sunlight. As he led the horse away, Cordelia nestled deeper into Maverick's embrace. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and she found herself making wishes on them, not desperate pleas for survival, but hopes for happiness, for growth, for a future filled with the kind of love that made gardens bloom. "Thank you," she whispered against Maverick's chest. "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for giving me the space to remember who I am." She tilted her head to look at him. "For teaching me the difference between being owned and being cherished." His kiss was her answer, soft and sure and full of promise. 3 months later, their garden was a testament to faith rewarded. Tomatoes hung heavy on the vine, beans climbed tall stakes in neat rows, and the flower beds exploded with color sunflowers, turning their faces to the morning light, roses perfuming the evening air, lavender attracting clouds of busy bees. Cordelia spent her mornings tending the plants with the same gentle care Maverick showed his horses, and both seemed to thrive under such devoted attention. But it wasn't just the garden that had flourished. Cordelia herself had bloomed like her mother's flowers, growing stronger and more confident with each passing day. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by a quiet joy that made Maverick's heart swell every time he witnessed it. Their relationship had deepened too, built on a foundation of respect and genuine affection that felt solid as bedrock. They moved through their days in comfortable harmony, Maverick handling the ranch while Cordelia managed their growing vegetable garden and the small flock of chickens she'd convinced him to buy. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, she with her mending and he with his accounts, content in each other's presence. The first real test of their happiness came on a sweltering August afternoon when a group of strangers rode up to the house. Cordelia froze at the sight of them, 3 rough-looking men with calculating eyes and guns at their hips. Everything about them screamed danger, and old instincts screamed at her to run. "Stay behind me," Maverick said quietly, stepping between her and the riders as they dismounted. The leader, a man with tobacco-stained teeth and cruel eyes, spat into the dust. "Youthorn." When Maverick nodded, the man's smile turned predatory. "Heard tell you bought yourself a woman a few months back. Pretty little redhead, we're here to make you an offer." "She's not for sale," Maverick replied, his voice deadly. "Calm. Now, don't be hasty," the man continued, pulling a roll of bills from his vest. "I'm prepared to pay double what you gave for her. My boss has particular tastes, and she fits them perfectly." Cordelia felt bile rise in her throat. She knew men like this had been owned by men like this. The way they looked at her made her skin crawl, but more than that, it made her angry. She wasn't the broken, terrified woman they expected to find. "I said she's not for sale," Maverick repeated, his hand moving casually toward the rifle leaning against the porch post.
Everything?
"For sale for the right price," the leader laughed. "Come now, be reasonable. She's just a whore you bought at auction. You've had your fun now. Let a real man show her what she's good for. That was a mistake."
Hey,
Cordelia saw the change come over Maverick like a storm-gathering force. His gray eyes went flat and dangerous, and when he spoke, his voice could have frozen fire. "You have 10 seconds to get off my land before I put bullets in all 3 of you," he said with lethal quiet. "And if you ever speak about her that way again, I'll hunt you down like the animals you are." The leader's hand dropped to his gun, but before he could draw, Kestrel appeared from the direction of the barn, rifle already aimed and ready. At the same moment, Cordelia stepped around Maverick, her chin raised in defiant pride. "I'm not property," she said, her voice ringing clear across the yard. "Not anymore. I belong to myself, and I choose to be here. I choose him." She moved to Maverick's side, her hand finding his. "And any man who has a problem with that can take it up with both of us." The transformation was immediate and electric. Maverick's chest swelled with fierce pride at her courage, while the would-be buyers suddenly found themselves facing not a terrified victim, but a woman who had reclaimed her power and the men who would die to protect her right to keep it. "Your 10 seconds are up," Maverick said softly, and there was death in his tone. The men scrambled back onto their horses, all bravado gone in the face of such unified opposition. As they rode away, cursing and making empty threats, Cordelia sagged against Maverick's side, adrenaline making her legs shake. "You were magnificent," he murmured against her hair, his arms coming around her like a fortress. "Absolutely magnificent." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I was also furious. How dare they think they could just take me, like I had no say in my own life?" Kestrel approached, lowering his rifle with approval. "The young woman has found her claws," he observed with satisfaction. "This is good. A flower needs thorns to protect its beauty." That night, as they sat by the fire, Cordelia curled against Maverick's chest, still processing the day's events. "I never thought I'd be brave enough to stand up to men like that," she said wonderingly. "You were always brave," Maverick replied, his fingers combing through her hair. "You just needed to remember it. Now you know you're not the same woman who stood on that auction block. You're stronger now, free." She tilted her head to look at him. "We both are." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in pristine snow that turned the world into a crystal palace. The garden slept beneath its white coverlet, but inside the warm house, love continued to bloom. Cordelia had claimed the kitchen as her domain, filling it with the scents of fresh bread and hearty stews that made Maverick smile every time he came in from the cold. They had fallen into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Mornings spent in comfortable partnership, handling the daily necessities of ranch life, afternoons often lost in each other's company, evenings before the fire where they planned for spring and spoke of dreams that no longer seemed impossible. It was on one such evening, with snow falling softly beyond the frosted windows, that Maverick knelt before her chair with something glinting in his palm. "Cordelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know we didn't start conventionally. I know people will say, I can't marry a woman I bought at auction." Her breath caught as she realized what he was asking. The ring in his hand was simple, but beautiful, a single diamond that caught the firelight like a captured star. "But I'm not asking the woman I bought," he continued, his storm gray eyes never leaving her face. "I'm asking the woman who chose to stay, as a woman who built a garden from nothing and taught me what it means to be truly gentle. The woman who stood up to 3 armed men because she refused to let anyone else decide her fate." His voice broke slightly. "I'm asking the woman I love more than my own life. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she slid from the chair to kneel with him on the hearthrug. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course yes." The ring slid onto her finger like it had been made for her, and when Maverick kissed her, she tasted salt from both their tears. This kiss was different from all the others, deeper, more claiming, full of promises and forever. Their wedding took place in the spring, just as their garden burst into its 2nd year of glory. The ceremony was small, just Kestrel to stand as witness, the traveling preacher who made his rounds through the valley, the handful of neighboring ranchers who'd come to respect the quiet couple who kept to themselves and worked their land. With such obvious devotion, Cordelia wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit with flowers from their own garden woven into her auburn hair. Maverick had traded his usual work clothes for a proper suit, though he still looked more comfortable in leather and denim. But when he saw her walking toward him through the morning sunlight, his face transformed with such joy that several of the watching women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. "Dearly beloved," the preacher began, but Cordelia barely heard the traditional words. All her attention was focused on the man before her, Thaman, who had saved her not with grand gestures or violent rescue, but with patience and kindness, and the revolutionary act of seeing her as a person worthy of choice. When it came time for vows, Maverick spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Cordelia, I promise to honor your freedom every day of our lives together. I promise to be the man you choose, not the man you're obligated to. I promise to tend our love like you tend our garden, with patience and faith and the knowledge that the most beautiful things grow slowly." Through her tears, she found her own words. "Maverick, you taught me that I was worth more than what men said I was worth. You showed me that gentleness is strength, not weakness. I promise to choose you every day, not because I have to, but because I want to. I promise to grow old with you, to plant gardens and raise children, and build a life that honors everything we've survived to get here." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was witnessed by the mountains and blessed by the spring sunshine that seemed to approve of this union born from ashes and blooming into something beautiful. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful, a feast prepared by Cordelia and the neighbor women. Music from a fiddle player who'd ridden over from the next valley and dancing on the grass beside their flourishing garden. As the evening wore on and their guests gradually departed, Maverick and Cordelia found themselves alone beneath a canopy of stars, swaying to music only they could hear. "Mrs. Thorne," Maverick murmured against her ear, and she shivered at the sound of her new name. "I like the sound of that," she admitted, then pulled back to look at him seriously. "But you know what? I'll always call you in my heart." "What's that?" "The man who saved me," she said simply. "Not from those other men, but from believing I wasn't worth saving." Years later, when their children played in the same garden where their love had taken root, when grandchildren climbed the apple trees they'd planted together, when neighbors spoke admiringly of the Thorne Ranch and the couple who'd built something lasting from the rocky soil of trauma and hope, Cordelia would still sometimes catch Maverick watching her with the same wonder he'd shown that first day. And sometimes, when the light caught her just right as she moved among her flowers, he would remember the broken woman he'd bought at auction and marveled at the magnificent person she'd chosen to become. But mostly, he just loved her completely, faithfully, and with the kind of devotion that transforms the ordinary into the miraculous. Their love story became legend in the valley, told around winter fires as proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the world offered up something beautiful to balance all its cruelty. But to Maverick and Cordelia, it was simply their life, perfect and precious, and infinitely worth the courage it had taken to believe in it. In the end, that courage was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.